The first place we have to capture in our journey of faith is Jericho. It's the place of the stronghold in the mind. The battle ground is the mind. Abraham, thank you. No wonder y'all had that puzzled look. Where was Abraham called from? He was called from Ur of the Chaldees. Let's look at that call real quick. Genesis 12:1. Because Abraham is known as the father of what? Faith. So this whole faith thing begins with Abraham. Remember how we talked about everything that when we really start looking at the redemptive plan and purpose of God, it really begins to unfold with Abram and Abraham, the call of Abraham. Everything else is kind of preliminary. So in Genesis 12, we have this. Now, the Lord has said unto Abraham or Abram, get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, and I want you to go to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you, what's the next word? What's the next phrase? A great nation, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless them that bless you, and I will curse him that curses you. And in you, what's the next phrase? All what? Okay, that's the call of Abraham. That's also the promise to Abraham. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. You'll be a blessing. I'll curse him that curses you. And in you will all, what's the next word? Families of the earth be blessed. Question. What happened just prior to the call of Abram? This would be Genesis chapter 10 and 11. What happened? Babylon. Because prior to the Tower of Babel, the whole earth was of one language, one speech, and they all dwelt in one place. God called Abram out of Ur of the Chaldees and told him, get away from your country, from your kindred, and from your father's house. So Abram gets a call from God to come out of the families and the nations of the earth, and he's going to make a nation that's separate from all of the nations that were divided at the Tower of Babel. But with this nation, God says, I'm going to bless all the families of the earth. So this nation is to be God's instrumentality to bless all the families of the earth. This is the gospel. Everybody with me? This initiates the unfolding of God's plan. So God calls Abram out of Ur, and he says, I'm going to take you to a land. This becomes the promise of the land. This is why the land plays such a big part in what we read with Old Covenant Israel. It's the issue of the land and the promise of Abraham. This is what they're fighting about now. This thing has deep roots. But this promise expands with the birth of Isaac, because now he brings in the seed. Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. Okay. So back to Hebrews. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should receive after for an inheritance, he obeyed. And he didn't know where he was going. Notice that faith has a human element. God gives the call, but what do? It begins with an O. Obey. So without obedience to the word, we can't say we're in faith. God gives the word. Our part is to respond to the word in obedience. Is this works? No, it's faith. Fear not. Don't don't fear what you can see. Have faith in what I say. Okay? All right. So by faith, verse 9, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob. Question: why isn't Ishmael and Esau mentioned? It's just Isaac and Jacob. Ishmael was Isaac's brother. Esau was Jacob's brother. Why aren't they mentioned? Isaac and Jacob is where the promise was, because remember, when God appeared to Isaac, what did God say to Isaac? I am the God of your father Abraham, and I'm going to give you the promise that I gave to Abraham. This begins the thing about the firstborn. When he appeared to Jacob, what did he tell Jacob? I am the God of your fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and I'm going to give you the promise. The promise never changed. The covenant never changed. It rests in the seed of Abraham, and it's Isaac and Jacob. Is this making sense? Question: who is the seed of Abraham? Jesus is the seed. They're types and shadows. Jesus is the seed to whom the promise was made. That's why he inherited all things. Y'all see how this connects? But it only connects in Christ. Then Paul goes on to say, now, if you be Christ, then and only then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So let me ask you a question. Whose land is it? The land. Whose land is it? It's his land. But what land are we really talking about? What did Adam lose? Dominion where? Over what? Over the earth. What did Jesus receive? He's Lord of heaven and earth. So ultimately, who owns the earth? Okay, just so we're clear. Just so we're clear. And so Jesus could say to his followers, the meek will inherit what? Okay. So why so many Christians trying to get to heaven? Let me keep reading. Let me keep reading. So now I didn't say if we die before the Lord's come, we're not going to heaven. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's not our eternal home. So John could say, I saw a new heaven and, okay, coming down. So does it sound like God is actually going to get what he told Adam? Yes. We're just living out the story. All right, let me keep going. By faith. Now watch what Abraham did. He looked for a city that has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He looked for a city whose builder that has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. What's the city? Which one? The new Jerusalem. Again, people are fighting over physical land and a physical city. That's what Ishmael and them do. That's what Babylon does, because Babylon is still trying to find a place where they can dwell and make a name for themselves. So John could look and say, Babylon is fallen. Come on, y'all, out of her. Who? My people. This is the same call Abram got. This is the believer's call. Y'all okay? Cause y'all looking at me like, wait a minute, brother Darrell. That ain't what they told me in Sunday school. Okay, so he looks for a city whose builder and maker is God. By faith, I'm gonna read through a little bit of this because I want to get to verse 13. Through faith, also Sarah herself received strength to do what? Conceive seed. Wait, she had a barren womb. She was past the years of childbearing, but through faith, she received strength that actually impacted her physical body, which made it possible for her to conceive seed. That's the power of faith. And was delivered of a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. This is faith. She received strength because she judged God faithful who had promised. Despite my physical body, despite the fact I'm past the years of barren seed, I went through that. What do they call it? Ladies, what they call that? Menopause. Yeah. She said, I went through menopause like 20 years ago. But God said, I am going to have a son. And she believed God was able, and her faith became the channel through which the power of God could flow into her physical body. This is how faith works. Faith isn't magic. But it does serve as the conduit through which the power of God can flow. This is why healing is possible. But it's God who's doing it. We're just responding to what he promised. That's why we need to know what he promised. Where are we going to find out what he promised? In his word. He made this pretty easy, didn't he? It takes us and our theology to complicate the matter. So, therefore, sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead. That's talking about Isaac. So many as the stars of the sky multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. We exist because Sarah believed God. Wow. Wow. See, we never know how our faith is going to impact future generations, because we just look and we say all hope is gone. In the natural, everything just going to, the world going to hell in a handbasket. Not until the purpose of God is fulfilled. So he became the God of Abraham, that's one generation. Isaac, that's another generation. Jacob, that's another generation. Because God is also the God of generations. God moves from generation to generation to generation. And he always has something to say to each generation. But it's never any different than what he told the former generation. Oh, this is good. I hope y'all are getting something out of this. All right, here we go. Verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises. Well, wait. Sarah was promised a son, right? Yep. She received a son, right? Yep. But this says they died not having received the promises. They didn't receive the ultimate promise that God gave, because they couldn't without us. Because the ultimate promise was fulfilled in who? In Jesus. He's the seed. He's the true seed. So they died in faith, having not received the promises, but having seen them afar off. You mean faith will give you sight? Faith gave them the ability to see on down the line. They embraced those promises though they were far off. We're going to see this with Abraham. They were far down the line. They saw them afar off, and they were persuaded of them, and they embraced them, and they confess. They're just strangers and pilgrims on the earth. We just here. We just sojourning through. We thought the only sojourn that they had was the sojourn in the wilderness. No, their whole life was a sojourn. They were going to the promised land. We just sojourning through this. This ain't the finality. This ain't it. The finality will not occur until Jesus appears and makes all things new. Then we have entered into the promised land. Will there be no more death, no sorrow, no crying, no weeping, no bills, no bill collectors? Okay. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of the country from where they came out, they would have had opportunity to have returned. And we kind of see this periodically of people wanting to go back. So if they wanted to go back to Babylon, they could have went back. Y'all remember Lot's wife? She was delivered, but she looked back. Children of Israel got into the wilderness. They wanted to go back. So there are always those in a generation that would rather go back. That's why we've got to hold on to our confidence and our assurance of faith. Because when the going gets tough, we often want to go back, as bad as it was. Why? Because we're called to go to a land that we have to get there by faith, meaning we don't know where we're going. We don't know the journey. We got to follow the cloud. We have to walk by faith. And sometimes when things start getting tough, and we talking about, well, I'm holding on to this promise God said, God sent his word, and everybody around you saying, hey, look, look, I'm trying to tell you what you better do. And you say, no, I'm standing in faith. Because this is what God promised me. Family members looking at you like you're crazy. Folk on the job looking at you like you're crazy. Faith is not a magic carpet ride. And what's interesting is this. They weren't even born again. They were not born again. They did not have the infilling of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit would come upon them, but they didn't have the indwelling. So they're looking to the cross. We're looking back at it. So who's really in a better position, them or us? Well, that too. But I mean, in things pertaining to God, who's in the better position, them or us? We are. And the writer of Hebrews is bringing them to light to say, well, look what these folks did in faith. After he talked about everything he did in Hebrews 1 through Hebrews 10 that talks about the believer's position. He says, now faith is. Consider these folk, what they did by faith. Then he starts listing all these folk. But there's a couple of people that I do want to point out. Y'all know the story about Isaac and well, let me talk about Abraham and Isaac, and then I want to jump to the other folk. I want to jump to the others. But it says in verse 17, by faith, Abraham, when he was, what's the next word? Oh, oh, you mean he was tested? Okay. So let me make a clarifying point. Abraham and all saints, including us, will be tested. What he was not was tempted. Many people say and still believe When things happen, it's God tempting them. No, God's not the tempter. The devil is the tempter. Let's let's get the record straight. We're tested. How do you know you have faith if you never have to use it? But what happens when you use it? What does that do to your faith? It increases it. It's like any other muscle in your body. If you don't use it, it might atrophy. Ain't that what they call it? I'm trying to sound intelligent. You know, if you never use your muscles, you don't use them. But if you're using your muscles, you may find out you're stronger than you thought you were. That's what the purpose of the test of your faith is, because our faith is more powerful than we know. And the only way we can come to know how powerful it is, it has to be tested so we can use it. Okay? So, where we at? Okay. By faith, when he was tried, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. Y'all remember that story? At 14 years, God told Isaac or Abraham, now take now your son, your only son, Isaac, and offer him as a burnt offering. This is the son that God promised him. Now God's telling him, go offer him, go kill him. And what did Abram do? Somebody tell me the story in a nutshell. Don't tell me y'all don't know. Uh-huh. Right. He said, me and the lad, we going over yonder place to worship, but we gonna come back. And Abram had every intent in killing Isaac up on that mountain, but he believed God would raise him from the dead. Why? Because he has to fulfill the promise. Now, what is that? The offering of Isaac. Abraham offering Isaac. What is that a picture of? What's that a type and shadow of? What about him? The father offering his son. See, all of these pictures, the gospel, it's all through the Old Testament. We just never connect the dots. So now, then God says, now, because you have not withheld your only son from me. Oh, all right, let me keep going. And all of this was done by what? So, what has God always responded to out of people? Does he respond to faith or does he respond to the works of the law? Faith. God always dealt with people on the basis of faith. They thought he was on the basis of the law. No, the law were types and shadows, and the law showed what you can't do. But let me show you what you can do if you believe. Oh, oh my. All right. So 17, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, he offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall your seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up, as we pointed out, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure, in a type, in a shadow. So when we're reading these stories in the Old Testament, look for, okay, what is this a type and a shadow of? What can I learn out of this? So I won't talk about Jacob. Y'all can go back and read it. I won't talk about Moses. You can go back and read it. I want to go to verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about for 7 days. What happened at Jericho? What's the story of Jericho? Y'all know we sing the song, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. Jericho. And we sing the song. Okay, what's the point of Jericho? Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. That's what it says. Now Jericho was securely or straightly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, 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 this is vision. I have given into your hand Jericho and the king thereof and the mighty men of valor. In Joshua chapter 5, this is where Joshua circumcised the nation because they hadn't been circumcised in the wilderness. Joshua, or Jericho, was the border of the land of promise. If Israel is going to occupy the land, they first have to defeat Jericho. It's the place of the stronghold. Now, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They're mighty through God to the pulling down of what? Strongholds. Where are they? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. The first place we have to capture in our journey of faith is Jericho. It's the place of the stronghold in the mind. The battle ground is the mind because it's between faith and unbelief. The strongholds are not in the third dimension. I know what the apostles and prophets are teaching, but the enemy is not out in the ether. The enemy is trying to work in your thought process to keep you out of faith. Everybody with me? Now, how did they conquer Jericho? By faith. So